hacking into ABox, just as an example of what you could do on this midterm. And you don't have to follow these steps, but it could be helpful. Maybe through today's discussion, we can tie together the vulnerability assessment lab, which is due today, and then the exploitation lab, which is due on Wednesday. And maybe throughout that discussion, we can answer questions you have about the midterm. Okay, so I'm going to use against Metasploitable. I'm going to use a particular exploit, and that is this PHP. I'll just show you what it is. It's kind of hard to say. Okay, so this is my exploit, and I want to set a payload to let's see, set payload. Okay, so this is the payload I want to use. So set payload generic and then I have to set this to the Metasploitable IP. So I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get, I have to exploit Metasploitable, and then I can show you the sessions. So hang on. Set our host. And I think that's it. Okay, so now so your question was with sessions. So when you run an exploit and it's successful and you get a interpreter session or something like that, what you have is what's called a session. And you can have actually multiple sessions to a variety of different computers. And each one of those sessions you can background, which means that you remove yourself from Meterpreter, you leave Meterpreter open, but you go back to Kali, to MSF console, where you can do other things, like maybe attack a different computer. And if I type the sessions command and I use the -L, it'll list all the open sessions. So in this case, I have one open session. The type is using a shell and is connecting to that IP address, or from my IP address to the Metasploitable IP address there. So I have one session open. And if I want to go back from MSF console to Meterpreter, I can type the sessions command -I, which stands for interact. And then I type in the number of the session I want to interact with, which is 1. So now if I type enter, now I'm back in that session. Now I'm back on that machine and I'm controlling it, or could control it. So does that answer your question about sessions, or do you have a different question?
Yeah. It said to put it in the background, and then I did, and then I was like, I don't know how to find it.
Oh, how to get back to it? Okay. So the way to get back to it, so if you're in the Meterpreter, if you have an open Meterpreter terminal where it says Meterpreter, and you can actually enter in Meterpreter commands, you just type the background command. Or if you don't have that, like in this case, there is no Meterpreter session. It's just blank. I can hit Control-Z, and that will, in Unix, or Linux, that's the control the key combination to background something. Just click yes, now it's back there. And then to Laura's point, like how do I get back there? Well, first of all, you list your open sessions, which is again, sessions.-l for list. There's the session number. And now I type sessions-i to interact, and then the number, which is again, right there under ID, ID 1. Does that make sense? And now I'm back there. Other questions about the exploitation lab or about sessions? So why would sessions be helpful? Why would you even want to do this? Why would you want to background this? You know, Sam? To hack multiple people? Yeah, that's one reason. Any other reasons? Sometimes you just want to prepare some exploit or run some tools locally. That means on your Kali machine, so that you can do something else. Like let's say you wanted to develop some malware or some tool that would allow you to do something on your target host. Well, let's say you wanted to prepare that and then you wanted to upload it to your host, to your victim machine. Well, you could background a session, and then that same window you could interact with MSF console or open up a different window, and anytime you could go back using the sessions command to connect back to that victim computer again. So it's just a way of basically detaching yourself from the active session and letting you do something else. Like maybe interact with multiple machines, or maybe do something in MSF console and then go back. This is actually a super useful technique, especially if you have multiple machines open. Other questions? Here. All right, I want to point something out here with this exploit. So remember when you, where I showed you how I exploited Windows, like with Icecast, and it gave me that really nice meterpreter window, and I could run those really handy meterpreter commands like hash dump and like keystroke logger and stuff like that, key scan. Well, in this case, I've got nothing. Like, it doesn't even tell me I was successful. It looks like it's frozen or broken, right? Well, unfortunately, when you use an exploit against Linux, often this is what it will look like. But if I type a command, it actually works. It responds. So I just typed the whoami command, and this machine is saying, your username is www.data, which means that through this exploit, I've gained control of the web server user. In Linux, a lot of applications have their own user. In this case, Apache has its own user. It's called www.data. So what I'm showing you is that this actually works. I can type ls, I can type print my working directory, I can navigate around, but I just have like a shell that's really not that useful. I can't do things like the top command. This is supposed to show me interactively what the top processes are on the system. So I don't have that. So what we call this, to use the vernacular, is a jail shell. It's a shell that's kind of restricted. Again, a shell is like a terminal. It's just a way for you to interact with the system. And a jail shell is one that's not full featured. And let me scoot this over so you can see better. So I'm showing this to you because in your midterm, you may find yourself with a jail shell like this, where it's not super useful. In fact, so I tried clearing the screen. I couldn't clear it because it's a jail shell. So there are two ways that you can upgrade a jail shell into something that's more full featured. I'm going to give you the notes to do this, so you don't have to memorize this command or write it down. But let me just demo two of them for you. So one of them is this is a trick. I can run Python, and I can get Python to run this specific code. So run the code, import pty, which is a library to give me terminal access. And then using that library, I'm going to spawn the output of the shell command, which is in Linux, it's under bin /bin, and then the command is sh. And yeah. So I'm using Python to import that library, and using this function under the PTOI library, it's going to spawn a Unix shell. And once that happens, it should give me something more full-featured, but this case, it's not. Yeah, that did not work. Try this one more time. Python. I think I messed up with the double quotes, using single quotes instead of double quotes. Sage. Port. Yay, okay, now it works. So before I used single quotes around /bin/sh, and that tripped it up. But now, see how I have that $ and have this blinking cursor? Now I could do stuff like, well, top's not gonna work, but I can do other things like clear and, actually clear's not gonna work either. I have to set this term variable first, but it's better than a jail shell. It's better than what I had before. So let me show you something else. I'm going to background this, and this is an example of why you might want to background something. And again, I'm videotaping this. I'm recording this lecture today, so if you want to, you can replay it, any of these commands, after the fact. So yeah, it's recording. But if I am going too fast, let me know, and I can slow down if you want to. So I'm going to run the sessions command, and now notice that I have one session open again, same session, and now I'm going to use a post module. So I'm going to type post, or use post multi manage. And then this, I guess you can't really see it this well. Let me minimize this a little bit. It's called shell to meterpreter, and its one job is to take a jail shell and upgrade it to meterpreter. So let me show you how that works. So show options. So all I have to give it for this to work is to give it a session number as a variable. And I already showed you that that variable is number 1. And I need a remote host, in which case I already set that. Let me just set sessions and then try that. Set session 1. Okay, so I ran this command, this exploit, and now it says meterpreter session 2 opened. So if I go back to sessions, I list these, it'll show me that I've got 2 open sessions. Let me make this bigger. So now I've got session 1, which is my original exploit, and now session 2, this is the new meterpreter, the new upgraded session on that box. So if I go to sessions, interact 2, now I've got a meterpreter terminal on that Linux box. So this is a way of upgrading from a jail shell, which is not super useful, to something that is useful, which is meterpreter. And now I can type shell, and it'll just give me a jail shell error. So that's actually not useful, but I can type exit, and I'm back into Meterpreter. I can run any of these Meterpreter commands. Okay, so I'll post both of these instructions so you can use them in the midterm, but you might find yourself in a situation where you run an exploit and it looks like nothing happened. It looks just like, well, like this, like nothing. Sessions interact 1, where there's just no interaction. And just know that that's called a jail shell. You can still type commands, but you'll want to upgrade it to something better. And I'll share that code with you, these commands with you. Have questions about this? How this works, or okay. All right. So in this case, I think that's all I wanted to show you about exploiting something. So let me show you, just start this walkthrough. All right, so now I'm going to use a different VM. This is not Metasploitable. This is a different VM. It's called DICE. And I downloaded this virtual machine from a site called VulnHub, like Vulnerability Hub. It's a really cool site. It's a site that just has a ton of different virtual machines that hacking enthusiasts have created and uploaded. And you can teach yourself by downloading these vulnerable virtual machines and attacking them, trying to break into them. It's kind of like a puzzle. Like your job is, like the whole goal is you download a VM, and then your goal is to become root on that virtual machine and then take off any sensitive data you can find. And it's kind of like a game. And some of them are more difficult than others, and there's just tons of them. And there's walkthroughs online for how to compromise different virtual machines on VulnHub. But if you like this midterm, if you like this activity of hacking and breaking into things, and you want to expand your skill set, you could do this. In fact, I have a student this semester, he's taking an independent study class through me, which means it's like a custom class. Like we together came up with a curriculum for him, and he like filled out this form with the department. And part of his task this semester is to use VulnHub and get into multiple vulnerable virtual machines and write how he did it. So he's learning a lot through that process, and you could do this too. For example, if you wanted to follow along with me, you could download this VM from, it's called DICE. It's on vulnhub.net or .com, and you can run all these steps yourself if you want to with me, or you could do it after the fact using the video and just practicing. But that's what this is. So I'm not going to show you this screen again because now we're trying to break into it. And I'm going to do all of that activity from Kali. So going over to Kali, let's get out of, I'm going to minimize this. And we'll get ourselves a new terminal. All right, can you see that okay? Should I make that bigger? Is that good, Braden? Can you see that? All right. So this IP address is 192.168.1.100, and I could just ping it. So I'm trying to think of a scenario where you would do this in the real world, where you just start with an IP address. Maybe you know that a certain network, a certain company owns a network, a certain IP range, and you're testing each, like multiple IPs within that range. Whatever scenario you want to use from the starting point, just say that we want to test this IP address, kind of like your midterm. I'm just going to text you on Slack. So keep your eyes on Slack after class. I'll give you the IP address for your server, and then you're just going to test it out. So I'm running this, and nothing's happening. What does that mean? What can you infer from this? What do you think, Mark? If I ping something and I get nothing back, what do you think is happening? Yeah, that could be. So in the context of this class, that's probably what's happening a lot of the time. But let's say you know you have internet connectivity and you're just not getting back something. Like I could ping Google and get something back, but I'm getting nothing back from this. So like Google's responding to me. But if I ping this IP address, nothing. So what else could be happening? John? That's true. So that's like another example of misconfiguration. What else? Any other ideas? Lar? Yeah. So depending on what firewall is set, they could be filtering traffic. That's what a firewall does. We say the word firewall, but you could mentally replace the word firewall with filter, and it would mean the same thing. So someone could be using a filter to filter ping traffic, so you'd never get any ping traffic through. Does a computer have to respond to ping requests? It actually doesn't have to. So Google is polite. It's acting as a service to the world to let us ping it, but my servers, I don't respond to pings because I don't have to, and it's just providing information. So this actually doesn't mean that the server doesn't exist. It just means that it's not responding to pings. So if we wanted to have like a more thorough test of whether this system is actually live on the network, what else could we do? What would you do? Let's see, Tom. Yeah, you're talking about Nmap? Absolutely. Nmap is a great tool for this. So we could type in Nmap, and then there's like a ton of different commands, but one command which would be super useful is -S_V, which means services. So list all the services on this IP address. So let's do that. So it'll run for a minute or two. Yeah, so not only is the server there, but a lot of ports are open. So FTP is there. What does that stand for? Remember what FTP is? It's File Transfer Protocol. It's just you can upload files and download files via FTP. SSH, you know what that is? There's port 80 or HTTP, that's web traffic. SMTP, that's email. So that'll this server will send email via protocol SMTP, and it can actually interact with clients with email with IMAP. That's this right here. So this is actually multiple kinds of servers. It is a web server, it's an SSH server, it's a file transfer server, and it's an email server. So that's actually pretty cool, because what that means is for this one box, we have a pretty broad attack surface. So potentially we have a lot of services that we could try to exploit. So what would you do first? So you see these ports are open, now what? I'm just gonna call on people, so if you don't mind, just keep people awake. So Sam, what would you do? So yeah, we could do this. So this is telling us version numbers, and if we wanted to, we could use Nessus to really tell us how vulnerable these services are. This is just telling us that these services exist and they're open, but Nmap doesn't tell us that these are vulnerable. We could use Nessus, and that would tell us that. But I'm going to show you a different technique besides Nessus, just because I think there's some lower hanging fruit here. Like, what can we do to learn more about the server? Yeah, Grant.
You can run command to get information out of the operating system.
Yeah, we could do that. That's like nmap-o. So this is so we could definitely do this. While we wait for this to go, notice that it is a web server, so we could actually browse to it and to see what's there. So that's actually a really good technique. It's just to do just simple reconnaissance, which just means just check it out. Like, what does it actually look like? So let's do that. So I'm going to open up a web browser, and I'm just going to type in its IP address. And this is the really crummy website that's being served from this server, from this virtual machine. So it's saying, welcome to DICE, and all this stuff. And so it's just saying, this is the game. So click here to continue. And now we're like, this is the actual, what the site is supposed to be. Let me make this bigger. So this is a company server. The company is No Security Core. And this is its company portal. And here's some boilerplate text. And then there's actually some users on here. So it tells us the head of HR. What else? Travel compensation, benefits, director of engineering. And then it says, if you have any problems with the server, contact the senior system administrator, and then these system admins. Okay, so it might seem kind of like, I don't know, like unprofessional to list this, but many, many companies do list their employees and their employees' email addresses. And what's kind of useful is that these names for the people on this server, they're actually pretty useful as, well, usernames. Like your Temple IDs, that's the same ID as it's a part of your Temple email address, isn't it? If you just take that first excerpt, if I get your email, that TU email, now I know what your Temple username is. And that's the first step in password cracking, is to know what the login is. So potentially, like, these are all, well, usernames that we could try to crack. Now, if I wanted to go down this route, if I wanted to crack passwords on this computer, how would I do that? What tool could I use to try to guess user accounts on this machine? Maddie? Yeah. So it's called a biographical dictionary. So you could totally use, so actually that's a really good technique, is to take, like, I could crawl this web page and just use all of the strings in this web page, including the usernames and emails, and use that to generate passwords. But I'm going to do something even simpler. I'm going to, hang on a second. See if I have this list already made up. I don't know if I do. Okay, I'm just going to take all these usernames and copy them. And then I'm just going to just grab the usernames here. So I've got Mary M. I've got Patrick P. And I'm just going to delete the email part. I just care about the username. There's Benedict B. So it's like last name and then the first initial. And here's another dude. And now I have these system administrators. So by the way, if I was going to crack the password for any of these users, which one would you prefer? Like, if you could just have your choice, or where would you start first? Yeah, Laura? HR? Why? Okay. So that's, I don't know if they're worse than accounting, but they're definitely one of those departments that are targeted because they deal with so much sensitive information. and they're not always super InfoSec savvy. Yeah, Davis? Why system admin? They have more privileges, so they can do more things. So to take both of these answers, I like both of these. I think my ultimate goal, like I don't really care what the system admin like information that person has. I want to have that person's access rights. And with HR, they probably have limited access privileges, but they probably have the data that I really care about. So I'd probably want to start with the system admins and get their access, gain control of a system admin's account, and then I could do things like get the data from HR. So in this case, I'm just going to try like really simple attacks and just see what I get. But my ultimate goal would be to become a system admin, and then, well, that's not an intermediary goal, and then the ultimate goal would be to get sensitive data from HR or something like that, like accounting. Okay, so I've got all of this, and I'm going to reverse this. So I'm just going to put the last initial first. Let's see, what was that? So far, this is not like elite hacking. This is just like basic stuff. But you know, the basic stuff often works. So don't knock it. Just give it a try. If it doesn't work, you can always move on to something like more difficult, like Sam was talking about. Like, are there exploits for these services? Well, yeah, we'd like to see. But let's try something basic first. Okay, so in this case, I've got all of this, all of these usernames, and let me paste it into a text file in Kali. Okay, so here we are. What am I going to call this? Usernames.txt. And here's a list of usernames right here. Okay, so I'm going to use this list of usernames to guess, to crack passwords on this box. So what of these open ports up there? Which of those would you try different passwords and usernames, different combinations of passwords and usernames to crack? Yeah, Davis. Why SSH? Well, you can use SSH to log in. Like these other protocols, like FTP, like you can get a username and a password, but that just gives you limited access to either upload a file or download a file. But with SSH, if I crack that, then I can actually become that user, which is pretty cool. So, so let's try SSH. I like that. So what tool can I use to crack SSH passwords do online password cracking? Hydra, yeah. So let's try that. So let's type Hydra. And in this case, so Hydra has a ton of commands, different options. If I just type the word Hydra or Hydra -- help, it'll show me all the things I can do with Hydra. So in this case, I could give it a login name, or I could give it with capital L, I can give it a file of login names. And that's what I have. So I can give this the name of this file, and it will try passwords for each one of these accounts. And then there's actually some other stuff here it can do. Let's see, where is this? It's right here, and it's not telling us what that option does. So let me just tell you, if you Google Hydra and options, it'll tell us. But why is it not telling us? So I'll just tell you what it does. But if you Google it, it'll tell you. Hydra, capital L for the list of usernames. And now I'll use this -E, and there's a couple different options. So -ES will use the same username as the password. If I use like R, it'll reverse that username as the password. So it might be like, I don't know, like Tony's the username, and if I reverse it, then I'll try the password ONYT, like backwards, to crack that, to use that backwards username as the password. But in this case, it'll use the username as the password. And now I give it the server address. And now I have to give it the protocol. And the protocol that we're going to try is SSH. So in your previous lab, you used the protocol HTTP because you're cracking a web server. But now we're cracking SSH. And the cool thing about Hydra is it'll crack all kinds of online protocols. So it's super flexible. And let's see. So 0 valid passwords found. And the first time I ran it, it just wasn't successful. So sometimes a lot of hacks are just probabilistic. They don't work 100% of the time. So I just reran it. And this time it said it was successful. In this case, the login for bbanter, its password is bbanter. So right now we've got access. So right now we could potentially be breaking the law because this will give us unauthorized access. Yeah, Jesse.
So, like, when you just doesn't work, like, is that, or like, this won't work?
Well, it has a reason because computers are deterministic, but it's really, oftentimes it's not obvious what that reason is. So if at first you don't succeed, just try the command again. And sometimes the second time it'll work. But what I'm saying is you might try an exploit, and the first time it'll work. And the second time you run that exploit, it won't. And it makes for really fun demos in class, because sometimes it won't work. But more often than not, an exploit will work. It just depends on the rating. If the rating for an exploit is like really good, then it should work most of the time. But I guess what I'm saying is if it fails, just try it again, and it might work the next time. Okay, so in this case, we have the username, we have a password. What do we do now? What would you do, Tim? To do what? You could try cracking more things to Hydra, but we already found something. We already have a username and a password for SSH. What would you do if you have these credentials? Yeah, Ruben? What? Try to log in? Yeah, let's just try logging in. So we've got this stuff, so let's try it. So that command is SSH, and then the syntax is really easy. It's just the username at the server. So bbanter is the username, and then the IP address. And now ask for a password. We know what that is. It's bbanter. Now we're in. So this is where I said this is where you potentially could be breaking the law if this were an actual server and we didn't have authorization. In this case, we own this because we downloaded the VM. We can do anything with it. So we will. So now we're on the box. What do we want to do here? Let your imagination run wild. Grant, what would you want to do? Okay. So here we are. We're in this user's folder. What else? What's that? Yeah, so that's actually some sensitive information which I think I left over from last time, to be honest. So let me just get rid of it because that can make this demo super short. Okay. Now there's nothing there. So now there's nothing there. We ran ls. What else can we do? Well, one thing we can do is we can use the ID command, which is super useful, and it will tell us something about this user. It tells us that this is its user ID, and this is the group it belongs to, users, and this is the group that it belongs to. So it it's a member of the group's ID, or it is a member of the user's group, and that's it. So that's kind of useful because in Unix and Windows and Linux, you can have whole classes of highly privileged users, and all they have to be is a member of a group, like a sysadmin group. In this case, it doesn't look like this person has this. Another technique we can use, before I continue, also this ID number right here, if that's at ID number 0, that means that it's root. It can do anything. In this case, we don't have user ID 0, it's like 1001. So it just means that this is probably not a privileged user. So let's see. So do you remember the sudo command? Have you ever tried that? I don't know if you've used that in previous labs. On Kali, your prompt looks like this. It's got this pound sign right there. And that's kind of a shortcut to tell you this user is root. So if I open up a Kali window here, let's open another one. File, new terminal. See that right there? And I can type in who am I? Who am I? I'm root. If I type in the ID command, see that user ID 0? So this, on Kali, you can do anything. You have full privileges on Kali. And you have this pound sign right there. That's a shortcut to tell you that you are root. In this case, we don't have that. We've got this $sign. And this just means that you are a less privileged user. Okay, but let's find out what else we can do. Because sometimes less privileged users can do things that they normally can't by using the sudo command, which means do something as the super user. That's SU. A super user is another name for root. So sudo -l. Well, actually, if I just type in sudo, it'll tell us the options here. Or I could type in man for manual sudo, and it will tell us like everything we want to know about the sudo command. But in the interest of time, let me show you that the L, -l, lowercase, it'll list you the privileges that a certain user has with sudo. So in this case, when we type sudo -l, and then we have to type in this user's password, which is bbanter, it says bbanter may not run sudo on Slack or Slacks. So we have no ability to do anything fancy here. So that's bad news. We don't have any fancy privileges. So what could we do besides, well, what could we do with low privileges? Tom? Yeah, you actually can. That's a good idea. So what Unix has is a list of users. And it has it in two places. There's a password file and there's a group file. And those are both world readable. And so even though I have low privileges on here, I can still see what that is. So let's try that out. Also, Grant was saying try to navigate around. So let's just go to the home folder. Just go one directory down, and I'll type cd --. And now if I type pwd and type ls, these are all the users on this box that have accounts, that have a home folder. So there's A Adams, bbanter, which I am right now, ccoffee, and there's FTP. And then Linux, a lot of times services will have their own user account. So this FTP folder probably just has, well, probably has files that people have uploaded to the file transfer server, the file server. So we might try to go to FTP, and it says permission denied because we're not the FTP user, and we're not a member of the FTP user group, and we're not root, so we can't do that. But let's try what Tom said. So it's under Etsy, and there's a bunch of files there, but the ones we want, one's called password. So ls password, actually password. So true story, the original programmers and system administrators could not type because typing was for secretaries. So the original computer programmers, all they could do is hunt and peck. And so rather than have a command called password with 8 characters, they named it passwood with 6 characters, so they could type it faster. Kind of funny, huh? It actually like took a generation for people to get to be typists and computer programmers. It's kind of funny. Okay, so remember the cat command that can list the contents of a file? So I'm going to list out the password command, or the password file, and here is the contents. So here's a bunch of different users on here. So root user, this message right here is if we wanted to go further in this virtual machine and crack stuff. We're not going to go the whole way today in doing this, but that's just an instruction or a hint for some later stage of this, this operation of hacking into this box. Look at this. So Linux just has a bunch of different usernames for different system processes, like FTP. So these aren't particularly useful or interesting, but these potentially are. So Atoms, Banter, and Coffee, these 3 correspond to those folders I showed you under /home. And bbanter we already have control of, but look at aatoms. What's different about aatoms, than these other users? Actually, right, well, I can't really highlight for you, but notice how aatoms has 1000:10, and bbanter has 1001, and then that second number is 100. The second number there, that's the group that it belongs to. So bbanter belongs to 100, and ccoffee belongs to 100, and aatoms belongs to 10. So what does that mean? And to Tom's question, or Tom's idea, let's look at the groups file. So that's, we can cat group. In fact, let me just open up a new window, so it might be easier to see. Let's see group. Just bigger. Okay, so we've got this window on this side, this one on this side, and if you scroll down, there's the users group, which is 100. Where's 10? Wheel. And the member of the wheel group is root. Okay, so this is a more ancient Unix history. The wheel group traditionally was a group for system admins who could do things, some of the things that root could do. So it says here that aatoms is a member of this wheel group, which means that aatoms is a more privileged user. And that's what we want. So what would you do now? So we found this out. What could we do to target an attack against aatoms, to try to crack aatoms' password? Any ideas? Do we crack any hashes at this point? So check this out. This is the password file. There aren't any hashes. What we have is this X. And these X's mean that this is where the password is supposed to go. But in this case, it has all of that blanked out. So more history. It used to be that there was a password file with the hashes of passwords, and anyone could read it because the password file is readable to anyone on the system. And that was a problem because people were just downloading those hashes and cracking them. And so to protect those hashes from being cracked, they were moved to a separate file, and that file is called shadow. So if we try to cat that, it'll say permission denied because we don't have permission to look inside the shadow file. That's where the hashes are. So we have all this metadata about users, but we don't actually have the hash, and that's a security design feature. So it would be really nice. I mean, if we were admin, we could look inside that shadow file and get that hash and crack those passwords. Okay, so we can't do that. So what could we do? Austin, what would you do? We know,
You could use Hydra again to find Adam's password.
yeah, we totally could. So check this out. So if we exit out of here, remember how last time we ran the Hydra command with this usernames list? So now we don't have to run against all usernames. We could run this against a specific username. So the flag for that, or option for that, is lowercase l. And we know what the username is because we saw it right in the password file. It's A.Adams. And we don't want to try to reverse that. I mean, we already tried that. In Hydra, it didn't work. The only username we got that way was bbanter because bbanter has really bad password hygiene. So we need something else. What is another good source of passwords? Like we could try like the RockU list. That's actually a pretty awesome list that comes with Kali. And we could do that with uppercase P and then the path to this word list. And mine's actually called RockU2, and I'm just gonna run this. So everything else is the same IP address, it says SSH at the end, but now I'm targeting a specific user name, and I'm using the RockU word list. You know what? Let's make it so we can actually see what's happening, just because it's more fun. So capital V stands for verbose, and let's see what it's doing. So you can see it's trying A.Adams and just all these different passwords, and some of these passwords may not be that nice, but let's keep that off to the side. Questions about what I've been doing while we wait for this to crack? Any other suggestions how you might crack this, or questions about what we're trying? I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, it's already finished. That's actually pretty cool. So this could take hours to go through an entire password file like the size of RockU. It could take hours over SSH. In this case, this person's password is easy to crack, and it took less time. But it might actually be worth our time to try to crack, to spend that much time to crack A.Adams, because A.Adams is a privileged user. So, I mean, we wouldn't do this for all users on the system unless we had unlimited time. But this week you won't for the midterm. You have 1 week to do it. But you could, it's worth it to do an in-depth attack on a highly privileged user. So here we go, we've got it. This is really good news. So let's try to log in as A.Adams this time. And the password is Nostradamus. System admins kind of have this God complex sometimes because they're so powerful in the system. Now, Nostradamus is like a prophet, so I don't, just some psychology there maybe. So here we are. We've logged in as A.Adams. What should we do to figure out what A.Adams can do? What commands would you run? The same as before, Maddie? Yeah, sudo. So people pronounce it differently. I say sudo because it sounds like the word sudo, but I have to type in Nostradamus again. And this is what it says I can do. So bad news is I can't become root. So what would be super cool is if I could type in sudo su, because that su makes you a super user. That's what the su commands, well, it actually means switch user, but if you just type su alone, it'll try to elevate you to root. In this case, I don't even have the permission to run that command. It would be pretty awesome if we did. If we run su normally, it'll say, well, you can become root if you know root's password, which we don't. But sudo command, what the sudo command lets you do, it lets you run a command as if you were root. In this case, it says you can't run sudo to become root, but you can do these first three things. You can run ls as root, you can run the cat command, and you can run the more command. So it's kind of like climbing a wall. Like each one of these new privileges is kind of like a toe hold or a finger hold. And we're going to use each one of these to our advantage in climbing this wall. Okay, so what could we do with ls as a root user? What could we do with cat as a root user? Any ideas? Robin, what would you do with these commands? To different folders? Okay, so we already looked at the home folder, and we already tried to look inside the FTP folder as bbanter. And you're saying is, well, we could try using ls to look inside there because now we can run it as root. So yeah, we could try that. So let's try that. Sudo ls ftp. And there's a folder inside of FTP called incoming. So we can say, okay, ls ftp incoming. And there's this salary file. It's a CSV file, which is like an Excel file. Stands for comma separated variables. And that .enc, that usually means encrypted. But that looks like salary data. That could be super useful. There could be a sensitive data in it. So we definitely want to get that. And now we know it's there. So what can we do now? We tried ls. What can we do with, say, the cat command? Grant.
You try to open that password file.
Yeah, so the cat command will actually give you the contents of a file. So we talked about the password file, which is called etc shadow. We can totally do that. So let's try sudo /etc shadow. That doesn't work. I have to type cat, sudo cat. So this means run the cat command as if I were root. And it worked. So this is really cool because now we have the hashes that weren't in the password file. They were protected inside the shadow file, and here they are. And this is what they look like. So here's A Adams, and I already know this password, so maybe that's not super useful to me. There's B Banter. I don't know C Coffee's password though, so I could crack this. What else? Oh, and there's root. Okay, so that's what I really care about, is I want to crack root's password because then, well, I can do anything on the system. So what can I use to crack these kind of passwords? What would you do? These password hashes. What kind of tool could you use? Davis? Yeah, Hashcat is an awesome tool, so we can totally use that. But first we have to get these hashes off the server. So how do we do that? How do we get these hashes on this VM down to Kali Linux? Any ideas? What'd you say, Hang? That actually does work. So I could just copy this. So just try easy things first. So I could just take all this stuff and just highlight and copy it. And then over here in Kali, let me open a new Kali window. Let me clean this up. BI shadow. Okay, so we did it. We exfiltrated all of these hashes off the server just by using copy paste, and there's nothing wrong with that. It works. That's awesome. So write and quit. There are other ways. So there was the cat command, and that printed the content of that file to the terminal. That's what we could see. But we could also, going back over here to this virtual machine, instead of running cat, just like this, we can redirect the output to another file. That's what this greater than symbol right here means. It means it's sending it, the contents of Etsy Shadow, into a new file, which we're going to call, well, we'll call this shadow.txt. So this tilde symbol right here that I'm highlighting, the tilde means in my home directory. It's just a shorthand. So I'm going to create a new file called shadow.txt in my home directory. All right. And so now in my home directory, there it is, and I can cat it, and I can do things to it. So now it's mine. And I could also copy it offline by using SSH again. I can actually copy from one place to another. So in fact, let me show you how to do that. So I showed you, here's A Adams here. Remember that salary data file? We can't go into that directory, but we could list it with ls, and we can use cat. So we could actually try that. Let me use, let me try to get that file off of here using SSH. So FTP incoming and sudo FTP /incoming. There it is. So I'm going to use the sudo command with the cat command. Salary. And we're going to redirect it into my home directory. I'm going to call it salary. Okay, so it might not look like it worked, but in Unix, if it doesn't complain to you, it means it worked. Like if we wanted to be really fancy, we could try to echo its exit code, which is 0. Every time a command runs in Unix, it has an exit code. And 0 means it worked. If it's some other number, it means it didn't work. And that's an error number we could look up. But it didn't say it failed, so if it doesn't tell us it failed, it means it probably worked. So let's go to our home directory. And there's salary. And what's cool about this is that now we can cat it without being root. Now the content of it, that's not readable. What this means is it's random data, and the terminal is trying to present it in some readable way to us. But it can't because it's just random data. And when a file is full of random data, it either means that it's full of actual random data or it's full of encrypted data because they look the same. And because it says that it's encrypted, this means it probably is encrypted. So let's say we wanted to pull down this file, the salary.enc file. Well, this is a command you can use which could be really helpful for your midterm this week. First, I want to know what directory I'm in, which is /home/Adams. And there's the salary file. And now I can run this from where I am. Let's copy it over. And the command I can use is called SCP, which stands for Secure Copy, and it works just like SSH. So I type in A Adams, and then the IP address. And it actually does use the SSH protocol. But the difference here is that now I type a colon at the end of the IP address, and I type in its directory, its path. And that path is over here. It's /home/AAdams, and then the actual file is called /salary. So I type in /home/, aadams/salary.enc. Okay. By the way, what does that look like? That string up there. We have an IP address or domain name, and then slash something slash. What's it look like, Maddie? Yeah, like in the file navigator, we call that Explorer. It's called Windows Explorer, and it has a path. When you browse the web, you see a path like this also. In both cases, Windows Explorer and on the web, that's a path. And the web was built on top of Unix, just turned 30 years old yesterday, or a few days ago, and it was built on a Unix system, and that's why we have a Unix path on the web. You might type like Google / like mail or something like that, and or Google / docs. That's just using the Unix convention. Anyways, this is not complete. I need to have one other parameter here, and I have to say I want to copy this file from that server, from that path, and I want to copy it to somewhere. I could copy it to another server, or I could download it to this server. And in Linux and Unix, the symbol for right here is dot. So type in Nostradamus, and it says it's 100% complete. So now if I type salary, I've copied it over. So that's just a super handy command to copy things to a server and also download something from a server using an SSH account. Okay, so we are swiftly running out of time. So let me show you a few more things, a couple brief things. One is the file command is super useful. So let me go back to aadams, and I have two files in this directory, right? If I type, I can kind of guess what they are, right? Because one is ENC, and that kind of implies it's encrypted. And .text, everyone knows what that is. It's for text files, right? If I saw .pdf, it's probably a PDF file, or .jpg, it's probably a JPEG file. Well, that's just because in Windows, the convention is to categorize files by an extension. But Linux doesn't have that. Like, you can give a file an extension, but that's not the Unix way or the Linux way. So what that means is you can have a file that's just called shadow, and you have no idea what kind of file that is unless you look inside. Or you could use a really cool command called file. So I'm going to run the command file star, and it will tell us what it thinks these files are. So it says the first one is data. It's just random data. That's what it would look at, or that's all it can call it. And the second one is called ASCII text. So that it has recognized that this is the contents of that file. If we were to type file /bin SSH or sh, it's a symbolic link to bash. We type this. It says this file type is an executable, which means we can run it. It's a program. So some people, like I also teach forensics, what I have taught in the past, and some people who think they're being really sneaky will take a JPEG that's incriminating, and they'll change the file name to like jpeg.doc, like a Word document. And all of a sudden, Word won't display it as a photo because, Windows won't display it as a photo because Windows thinks that file is now a Word file. But if on Linux, I can run the file command, it'll say, nope, that's a JPEG, because it looks inside, it looks at the metadata for that file. So in the midterm, just keep in mind this is a super useful tool. Something else is when you list files, this are all the visible files. But in Linux and in Windows, you can actually have hidden files. And to see that, you want to use the -a command option. So here, if I type in ls-a, it'll tell us everything that's hidden. And here we have a file called .bash history, which is actually a list of all the commands that this user has run on this machine. which can be like super helpful because sometimes there's passwords or other sensitive data right in the password history. There's screen. This is a way to add functionality when you remotely connect to a machine, to a server. So that's not particularly interesting. .text or test.txt, that is actually, so let's check that out. I think this is just another data file. It's probably A-L will list it in its long form, which is pretty useful, gives more data, and H means make it human readable. So in this case, 130K, that's the size of this hidden file, and this one here, so they're actually the same file. Anyways, look for hidden files when you search a computer because you can find really useful stuff there. So that's ls-l. So there's another suggestion for your midterm. All right, so what I haven't shown you, because we're out of time, is what we can do with that shadow file. I've shown you Hashcat in this class. There's another tool called John, and John is a really powerful password cracking tool that's older. It predates Hashcat, but it has some really cool features. And one of its features is it can take a shadow file and it can unshadow it. Basically, you give it a user, you give it the password file, you give it the shadow file, it will combine them so you have them in one. And that's really useful for password cracking because now you have the root user and the root user's hash. Okay, class, this is me recording now at home. I ran out of time in class, but I wanted to show you a tool called John the Ripper. It's a password cracking tool like Hashcat, but with some features that might prove useful to you in the midterm. So I'm just going to take a few minutes and show you this tool because it's pretty handy. So recall that we had copied the shadow file from the DICE VM. And this shadow file contains the password hashes for the users on the system, A. Adams, B. Banter, C. Coffee. Here's the password hash right here after the third $sign. But the password hash that we really care about is for root. Because if we crack this password, we can do anything on the system. We'll have full system privileges. And to do that, we're going to use a tool called John the Ripper. Now, in the midterm instructions page, linked to from the syllabus, if you scroll down to the bottom, I include several tips. Some are just random tips that'll be useful to you on the midterm, and some of them are specifically about password cracking. And some of the links that I give you here describe how you can use Hashcat to crack hashes that are in a shadow file. But John makes it even easier, so let me show you how that works. But just heads up for that password and those general tips from the midterm page. Okay, so we only care about this line from the shadow file right now. This is the one password we want to crack. So I'll select this entire line, copy it, and I'll create a new file called shadow_root. Doesn't matter what it's called, but that's where I'm going to stick this line. Paste this line in here, Control X. Yes, I want to save the file. And I'm going to call the file shadow_root. And just to demonstrate that this was successful, I'll cat the file. So there it is, just this one line in shadow_root. Now, to use John, whereas with Hashcat, I have to do some special formatting of this line in order to crack it, with John, I can just give it a shadow file. So in this case, I'll just type shadow_root, and I'm done. Just hit enter. And I'm not even supplying a password file, and that's because John has a built-in word list. It's not as long as the Rocky word list or other word lists out there, but it's sufficient for many cases because it includes the most popular passwords. So in this case,
We'll just let it go for a few more minutes and it's done. So it says use the show option to display all of the cracked passwords. So John show, and then the name of the file that we cracked, and there it is. So the username is root, the password is Tarot. And with this, we can now log into the system, and that's great. Now, oftentimes, the password word list provided with John is insufficient. So we can actually provide, we can give John an external word list. And to find out how to do that, we can type the word John and look at the options. It'll tell us what options we can use. And the one we care about is right here, word list equals file. So for example, we could say John word list equals user share word lists, and then rawq.txt, and then the file we want to crack. For example, we could give it the entire shadow file and just let it go. And you can see that it already cracked the password for A-Atoms, which is Nostradamus, and that's because it's cracking right on the system. That's why it's so much faster than Hydra, which is an online attack. But we already have root's password, so we don't really care about the other passwords anymore. So I'll hit Control-C to cancel this. And let's try logging into the server as root. Okay, type in the password, and it says permission denied. Now there's a reason for this, and that is Linux and Unix systems usually deny logins from the outside, that is from the network, either the local network or from the internet as root, and that's a security measure. Instead, you'll need to log into the server first as a different user, and then from inside the system, log in as that user. So let's do that. Let's just cancel this, and let's log in instead as A-Atoms. Okay, we've logged in, and now we can switch user to super user by using the su command. So just su like that. And we type in here the root's password, which is Tarot. And now we're root. So we can see this hashtag right here, the £. This is a visual indicator that we're root. Before, A-Atoms had the $sign in the terminal. But the way that you can really tell if you're root is if you type the ID command, and if the user ID says 0, then you really are root. And in this case, we are user ID 0, and that means we can do anything. So at this point, it would be easy to say that we've become root and we're done. But that won't work for your midterm report, and in the professional world, it wouldn't work either if you submitted a report to your client saying, we became root, the end. And the reason why is because managers tend to be less impressed with becoming root. And the reason why is because, well, many managers don't even know what root is. Maybe you didn't know what root meant before you took this class. And many managers don't know what it means. But more than that, managers want to see business impact. So they might say, so what, you became root. So your job is to show them the so what. So in the midterm, you might be fortunate to become root fairly early. And if that's the case, great. But you're not done. You need to demonstrate what you can do with root on that server. So look for sensitive information, copy it off the server, and in your report, document the kinds of information that you were able to obtain. And that will show the impact of having compromised the root account. So that's what I wanted to show you. Again, remember the tips section at the end of the password, the midterm instruction page. And as always, if you have questions, contact me on Slack. And I'll see you in class on Wednesday to answer questions.